I came from a family with no interest whatsoever in motorsport, but a father who was a doctor, virologist, but he actually did like mechanical things and was pretty keen on cars and everything like outboard motors on boats and things and tractors in the garden and stuff. So that sort of sowed the seed with me. And but where we had a divergence of opinion was I liked motorcycles by the time I was 16, and he'd been in the SAS and the war and watched people kill themselves on motorcycles too regularly. He had an aversion to them, so I had to keep my motorcycles at a friend's lockup down the road, pretend I didn't own them. But I started racing them when I left home and started working and lived in London and raced motorcycles at the weekend whenever I could afford to, and the bikes were working properly. You know, they were stripped down in the front room of the house in Fulham and put together on a Wednesday night, try and get ready to go to Snetton or some godforsaken place at 2:00 in the morning on a Saturday morning to drive up there in a knackered old transit and go racing bikes. And then I built a hovercraft at the same sort of time and raced that as well. So little hovercraft.
Like it's on swamps or something, was it, Roland?
Yeah, it was normally in the grounds of stately homes. Some misguided rich landowner would get convinced to lend the hovercraft club his lawns and lakes, and we'd go out and kill ducks and things, and racing across the lawns and hitting the trees. We ended up having to wrap mattresses around the trees because we were hurting ourselves too badly. But it was more dangerous than the motorcycles. So I did that for a while, and then realised that I was a paid up member of the Self-Preservation Society, and wasn't ever going to race a bike at a level that would win races. I got pole once at Silverstone, but that was only because the entries were taken out of a hat. The grid position taken out of a hat like a bingo caller, in the collecting area, and I ended up on pole.
Well, you've had a pole position. It's more than I've had on a bike. You can say that. So you might not want to mention that to Mick Doohan, your mate, but
then I ended up racing in one-make cars in the 80s in Ford Fiestas and then Honda CRXs. And when Derek Warwick became a Honda dealer in the late 80s, then we sort of folded the Honda CRX program into one of Derek's workshops at that time in Southampton. He had a Honda dealership down there on the south coast of the UK and ran the cars out of there. That then morphed into a Group N Civic Championship campaign as well for a few years, which was the sort of level under British touring cars, the next level down.
Yep.
And I enjoyed that a lot. But also, I was having fun, always knew it. Then I started backing James Kay, who some people, if they're old enough, might remember because he did a bit of racing in Australia in the mid-90s in a Toyota Carina that Bruce Miles from Christchurch owned. And out of that, my friendship with Derek led to a potential deal with Honda for touring cars in the middle of the 1990s. That didn't come off, but we actually got approached by General Motors with Vauxhall which is the equivalent of Holden over there, was the equivalent of Holden, and we started Triple Eight in 1996 actually with Ian Harrison, who was another friend of mine who'd been a team manager at Williams, team manager at ProDrive as well before that, and we came together with another guy called John Gentry, who was a designer engineer, and put Triple Eight together in 96. Yeah.
The success, I mean, it's the amount of times we hear teams say, we're a new team and we're building, and it gets old pretty fast. Like the expectation within a group often is too much about, trying to go to a race weekend and a top 10 is a successful weekend. Just looking today, when I saw, I think, so you came out here 2003, but the team continued in England till 2006. I think won 6 championships in that time in touring cars, British touring cars, which is just ridiculous. I think, the success here in Australia, everyone knows about, but I think to have done both championships and have that kind of success. The
team in the UK, it actually continued until 2016 or 2017. But I had no financial involvement after I came to Australia in 2003. That period, Ian Harrison took it over completely.
I actually remember in 2010 going and meeting Ian at one of the tracks. I think it was Silverstone. I went down to see the Triple Eight crew.
Yeah,
and meet your team there, which was great. But yeah, I do remember. Sorry, I did know it kept going because that was 2010 when I went over and met Ian at the British Touring Car events there.
Yeah, and they continued as prolific winners for many years. Ian's now retired, but they were prolific winners over there. And when I was there, but also long after I was no longer a part of it. But the relationship with General Motors continued for many years after I went as well, successfully. But by that time, I was in late 2003, as you said, is when I started on the Australian chapter.
And did you nearly buy the Holden Racing team, or is that just a rumor I heard?
When the Walkinshaw organisation in Australia, or the race team side of it, went into administration because the parent company in the UK had gone into administration on the back of the Arrows debacle over there. Then Holden themselves ended up taking over the team at short notice to keep the Holden Racing team on the road and competing. It was literally last minute stuff before the beginning of the season in 2003. And under the rules of TIGA, the Teams Association, back at the time in Australia, a manufacturer could not own a team. So they had to divest themselves of effectively the 2 teams that they had, which were the Holden Racing team and the Kmart team.
Yep.
And so they had to divest themselves of those. And yes, I spoke to the powers that be within GM with the support of the Australian guy who was actually running the UK side of GM at that point, but that didn't go anywhere ultimately. They then suggested that I might like to take over the second tier team, the Kmart team, and etc. But rightly or wrongly, I wasn't really interested in what I saw as a potential second fiddle situation. So I backed away from that. And then a few weeks later, the opportunity came up to buy the assets of John Briggs's outfit in Brisbane. So that's what I ended up doing.
Yeah, wow.
Worked out well. Only a couple of years in, first win, then 3 consecutive Bathurst 1000s. For me, just quickly, I've always wondered this one. What have you ranked higher, a 1000 win or the championship?
I'm a Bathurst person through and through. And I don't want to underestimate the value of a championship, whether it's a team's championship, which I think teams naturally value far more than the fans do, etc. And that's fine, but the industry puts great store in that. I feel rightly, but it's a bit of an internal thing, if you know what I mean. For me, Bathurst is the holy grail, and after we had a seminal moment 18 months into racing supercars in Australia, where Craig won our first race at Eastern Creek, and in those days, supercars was big enough that it was on the back page of the Australian on Monday morning. Big picture of Lowndesy in the better electrical car taking the flag at Eastern Creek on the Sunday afternoon, and we beat Ambrose for it. Marcus was the benchmark, and we beat him that day. So it really, really was a big moment. But then 18 months after that, we won our first Bathurst, and that to me was the really reaching the pinnacle and then winning it 3 times on the trot was so special that they changed the rules to try and stop it.